right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast. And we got another great, amazing guest today. Today is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. And we have Mr. Gabe Reynaga, who is a karate and jiu-jitsu world champion. He began his martial arts journey 41 years ago, starting in Okinawan Karate-do. One of the most dominant and dynamic competitors in the 90s in kumite and kata. He began training in mixed martial arts in 2009. Gabe fought 3 professional fights in the cage, winning his last by TKO at the age of 41. Now focusing on Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, he is an accomplished competitor, winning a world championship in 2018, where he received his black belt on the podium. Welcome to the show, sir.
Great to be here.
It's amazing to have you on the show. I was kind of telling you before, you may not remember me much from the tournament circuit back in the day, but man, I used to watch you compete in both sparring and forms, which was always impressive to me because back in the day, you're kind of a forms guy or you were a fighting guy. And I was raised by my instructor that, to be a martial artist, it was always important to do both. Right. And so I would watch you just in awe. I think my earliest memory used to have a long ponytail back in the day and the short Japanese traditional uniform. And man, so strong and so energetic. It was just so fun to watch you. And so to have you on the show today and talk about some of that history and bring me current to what you're doing now, it's just a privilege and an honor, sir. So thank you so much.
Awesome, man. It's great to be here. I've had the great pleasure of meeting so many cool martial artists over my time, my career. And, we were talking a little bit before the show. Mark Cox was always a buddy of mine. And, hearing, people's memory of watching me compete back in the day is awesome. I love running into people and they're like, man, I remember you doing your form and, saying this or saying that during the form, it was always one of those things where I enjoyed that part of my competition life and still competing today.
Very impressive. I love seeing that if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
I will be 51 in May. So
still competing, still getting after it. I love it. So let's kind of dive into, some history and tell everybody, a little bit more about your background. For those of you that are watching that may not be involved in martial arts, have never been in martial arts, you've got a great story though. You started in 1981, I believe is what you said, right? So
82.
What was it like? 82. What was it like starting, in the early 80s? Martial arts was very different, almost 40 years ago. What
Absolutely.
was it like for you?
So it's cool because my mom was involved with photography, and she would go to this specific, photography shop. Talking to the younger generations, they're like, photography shop? Like, what are you talking about? There was a actual place where you'd go and like develop pictures and, crazy times. But right next to that a place where she would go, there was a karate school. And my mom was always like a Bruce Lee fan. She always, liked the Bruce Lee movies, back in the day. And she just thought it would be cool for me to, sign up in martial arts. Back then, I think it was like 6 months for $99 or something crazy like that. Yeah, right. And she signed me up, and I remember going. And it's kind of a interesting like area of where I grew up is Oceanside, California. It's right outside of Camp Pendleton. So the area that we were in was a big spot where a lot of military would go, mostly like the younger guys. They would go and get their haircuts. They'd go and get their dry cleaning there. So it had a little bit of a downtown type of feel to it. For being a small city, it still kind of was almost like a mini, I don't know how to say it, maybe like a mini downtown Los Angeles in a way, but it was just a small little couple blocks. So every time you go down there, there'd be like different kind of like walks of life, a few transients, a few just like, people hanging out. It just had that downtown feel to it. So it was not really like the area where, people would they would go and hang out, but I don't know how to explain like a downtown feel. Anyway, so I go into our karate school, and I dug it. I liked training. It was cool. Karate back then, and you remember, it was very mystique pushed. Like, in other words, I feel like ever since the UFC came in the 90s, martial arts changed. But back then it was ninjas and Bruce Lee and Kung Fu and all these like different things. And you know, it was a cool environment that I was a part of. My sensei, the first sensei I had was Bruce Kernick, and that was his name. He taught a style called Ishinryu karate, and it comes from Okinawa, and he was big on history, and that was kind of cool because I got the opportunity to really like learn my lineage and know about like the founder of our style. The way he would run his tests, and you may do it the same, as he had the little sit down, you know, table in front of the people that are testing. And he would have them come up, and the first part of the test was the history of, you know, tell me some history about, you know, he'll ask you specific questions. What's his founder's name? How old was he when he started? How far did he actually have to walk from his village to the village to go train karate? And to me, that was awesome because I always excelled at like social studies and history. So I dug it, you know, always like, you know, was kind of like a show off in a way to let you know how much knowledge I knew about our style. So that was a cool part of my childhood. You know, I started when I was the year I turned 10, so I was 9. I just celebrated my martial arts anniversary last month, February 22nd, and so it was a lot of fun back then. It did kind of interrupt my cartoon time. You know, we didn't have DVRs back then, so my 2 favorite cartoons back in the day were He-Man and G.I. Joe, and both of them, you know, they were on during that time. So I was a little bit annoyed that I got to go to karate again today, Mom. You know, and she'd be real routine. I'd get home, have a little snack, do some homework, and let's go to karate. So I did that for quite a while, and it was definitely a cool part of my childhood.
Well, you know, I love that you talk about the history and tradition about martial arts, because I think it's something that I'm big on that. I was raised that way in my school with my instructors. As I told you, Dennis Ichikawa trained with Pat Johnson and Chuck Norris, and he would always tell us, you know, I would call it story time, right?
Yeah.
Story time was always really special to us. We would actually practice our forms with him at that time it was Wednesday nights. And the best part about that time was not really doing the forms, because we all kind of knew him and it was just kind of our workout, but it was him telling us the stories about the people that he trained with, and you know, their background, and just, you know, about their personalities and what he did when he was training. But I feel like sometimes we're losing that. You know, in my school, I love to tell stories, and I can see my kids, my own kids, sometimes roll their eyes. Oh boy, here we go with the stories, right? But you know, I think it's what really ties us together and binds us together, and carries on, you know, that legacy piece of martial arts, because martial arts, as you well know, is so different than soccer and baseball. And you know, I love, my kids played all the sports. I love them, but it just doesn't have that piece to it. And I think that's so important. And I can remember, I mean, we still have the table, you know, when we do testing, but I can remember calling my students up, and we would have a list of questions, things that they had to know. Who was the founder, what year, so on and so forth, just like you were saying.
So you guys were Tong Sudo.
Tong Sudo is correct.
Tong Sudo. And so your instructor, Ishikawa?
Dennis Ichikawa, yes.
He trained with the original Tong, or some of the Tong Su guys, Pat Johnson,
Chuck Norris. Yep.
So was it the Sherman Oaks karate, or what?
It was.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Ichikawa ran Chuck Norris's Sherman Oaks school, and then he took it. He ended up opening a school with Harold Gross, and then Harold Gross took over Sherman Oaks karate. And I know some of the history because I've had some other people, you know, on the show, but yeah, definitely they had that tie with Sherman Oaks karate. So that's where Bob Burbage started training, and you know, a lot of Tom Bloom, Joey Escobar, a lot of those guys.
To me, the karate history, like it was a little bit of a, what's the right word? Kind of like a pride thing for me, because not only was I familiar with the martial arts that I came from, but a couple months after I joined, my mom joined. And, she just kind of gets into stuff, right? She's like, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to get into photography, or I'm going to get into, whatever it is. And she jumps all in. So all of a sudden now with my mom training, we had all of the Karate Illustrateds, all of the black belt magazines, all the Inside Kung Fu's. Wow. So that was my door, my opening to getting familiar with the history and the other martial arts masters of all these other styles. And then shortly, I would say maybe a few years into our training, we started competing. But what ended up happening is we just got all into competition and still studying. Like, it's one thing to know who the current champions were at that time, Steve Nasty Anderson and Billy Blanks. These guys were the guys I looked up to, growing up. I was familiar with who was on top of the circuit at that time, Cynthia Rothrock, George Chung, some of these old school guys. And I always aspired to be like them. And then even going back a generation, then you started getting familiar with like who Chuck Norris used to compete against, like Skipper Mullins and some of these old school, like karate guys. And it's cool because like you said, like some of the stuff gets lost, but we all come from a great history. When martial arts came from Asia, the countries, whether it be Okinawa, Korea, China, and it came to the States, it's kind of like it morphed into its own thing, and it continues to change, today, but it's cool. Like being a student of the martial arts. I remember once I started competing, eventually I became an adult, from the junior division up to the adults. And I remember running into these guys that I grew up like watching, and then to all of a sudden be able to compete with these guys. It was really cool, and then all of a sudden when you start getting like props from some of these guys like Steve Anderson or, Billy Blanks or some of these guys that I was like, I grew up just, like putting them on a pedestal and them going, man, your kata, man, your form, it just gets me so excited to watch it. Yeah, I'd be like, all right, like I've made it, I'm impressing the guys that I used to like watch growing up. So it's definitely a fun journey.
And I'll bet that there's a lot of guys that are on the circuit now that are thinking the very same thing about you, looking back and going, man, I remember watching Gabe, and and then Mike Chat came into the fold, and John Valera, and all those guys. Like that was kind of the next generation. And then we, back then, it was traditional forms and traditional point fighting. Now the sport karate has evolved so much, and I think in a good way, because there's so many avenues. Back in the day, you can compete in one or two divisions, two, maybe three if you went up a division or down, but now you've got all these extreme divisions and weapons divisions, and there's so much.
They have the team forms too, right? They have like
I'm going to throw this up here because this is a name that you'll recognize. Cecil Peoples is watching, and he said it's been a while since he's seen you, but really loved watching you do kata. It was so beautiful. Thank you, Sensei Peoples, for being on and watching us today. He was an amazing guest on the show as well.
Yeah, Cecil is good people. I remember he had invited me up to a tournament of his and said, "Yeah, I just want you to do your form, Gabe. I want my people to see your form." Yeah. And I remember going up there, and the whole time he was going, "Go, Gabe! Go, Gabe!" Like I was doing my form. So
well, I think it was one of the first 5 tournaments that I went to ever was Cecil Peoples and Bill Parent would host their tournament in Granada Hills, and it was always known as like kind of the big tournament in this area at least. And so I was always excited to go and then getting to know him a little bit better. Let's shout out to Roseanne, I believe, Roseanne Azatat, who is watching here. Also another great guest on the show in the past. So make sure you guys go back and check out some of these other stories. Got a lot of great guests. But, talking about sport karate, who are some of the other people that you remember competing against that gave you a run for your money, that make you really work towards winning those titles?
Definitely. So as a junior, going into the adult division at that time, there were some people that were kind of like the dominant people. Mike Bernardo was a guy, I don't know if you remember that name, but he was a top, a high-level competitor out of Canada. He was number one in the weapons for his bow staff, but then also he ran the Japanese Okinawan division. and I wanted to be a little different. You know, I grew up doing traditional karate. Ishinryu is a little like kind of like different. People don't associate it with like the other Okinawan styles, or when you look at like the Japanese, the Shotokan or Shito-ryu, their forms are a little different. So they worked, but then I also around 15 started to get that opportunity to train with another guy who had just, it's crazy because he moved from Japan at the time, but he's Okinawan dude. He ended up like 2 towns from me, and his name was Morio Higaona, and he was 8th degree at that time in Goju-ryu, and he actually moved his world headquarters from Japan to a town called San Marcos, 2 towns from where I was located in Oceanside. So I had a really unique opportunity to train with, like, you know, in a way, almost like a Mr. Miyagi, right? Because not only did I train with him at the school, but I also was invited to his house for some of the supplemental training. In Goju-ryu, they use a lot of different types of like supplemental weight training that were kind of like from like the 1800s. So it's kind of cool, you know, and some of the striking that they do and stuff like that. And here I am, you know, that's one probably, I don't want to say regret, but it definitely, I wish I would have embraced that opportunity a little bit more, because I was 15, 16 years old. I wanted to go out, have a good time as a teenager, but I had this amazing opportunity for this master who, at the time when I was training, there were people from Israel there were people from England, there were people from all over the world that would come train with this dude. And here he is inviting me into his house to do, you know, just him and I supplemental training. And it's like, wow, you know, like, yeah, it's pretty awesome. So I took that real like traditional base, and growing up in the sport karate, and you probably remember back in the day, there were some, like, you know, we grew up in the LA area. So a lot of these guys that were out there competing were also some of the stuntmen, like Simon Rhee, some of the old school martial artists back in the 80s and 90s. They would spend time competing a little bit, but then they'd also be doing stunt work. So there was a lot of like showmanship. The one group that I was always like honored to be like able to represent, because I was always in awe of their demos, was called the Ted Tabura team, and they were out of like Redondo Beach area. There's a city I can't think of right now, but they were out of that area, and they were Polynesian, like Lima Lama, but they would do some really cool like music, and the crowd would just get all into it. And eventually they started to invite me to be part of their demos, and we would do them at like amusement parks like SeaWorld, and we'd go to like different places and do these demos, and just kind of like I learned and in doing it, training with him, it's like how to get the crowd into it. So I kind of used that, you know, and that was around my 13, 14, 15. I used that, how would you say, that showmanship, that presence, to when by the time I went into the adult division, I was able to kind of create something that had never been done before, because everybody was doing like the solid, you know, karate katas and stuff like that, but they weren't giving any flair to it. Right. And I said, okay, well, how can I blend these two? How can I blend traditional martial art and the flair? And little by little, you know, I started to like just implement certain things. You know, I grew up around poppers and break dancers. Now I'm talking some old school stuff, right? Yeah. All of a sudden now I'm starting to kind of do that in my kata. Like I'd start to pop my shoulders a little bit, and it was so different that people would be like, man, you know, we've never seen this before. And all of a sudden I start like, you know, my stuff would be different. And it was just like, you know, it worked, and it worked so well that all of a sudden now I'm competing against the guys at night with the music and you know, all this stuff. And it was like, I didn't have music, but I had what I had, and it changed. It really, you know, it made traditional forms at that time able to compete against the showmen of that day. Right, for sure. When was your first world championship? So I got my first in 1990 is when I first, the year I turned adult is when I won my first title. I did 1990, 91, 92, and 93. And what sucked in 93, I had just moved up in weight class. I was a skinny dude growing up. I was at 18, I was like 135, 140. So I always competed in the lightest weight category, and I did good there on the fighting side of it. And then in '93, I said, well, I'm getting bigger, and I'm gonna move up to the next weight category. Things were going great. I was out in Boston, and I was fighting, and this guy kind of got me a little bit. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this guy back. I'm gonna spin hook kick him. And when I did, everything spun except my knee.
Oh man!
And wow, I blew my ACL, and that really took a turn for me. I got it reconstructed, and unfortunately, I didn't do the necessary things that were required in order for my knee to get really strong. Like I just, I think I was like, what was it, 20? I was 22 when I tore it, right? So I'm relatively a young guy. And I just thought, well, doing my karate, that's all I need to do, and I'll be good, right? We always think like, our karate takes care of everything.
Right.
So I just started training, doing my stuff, and a year later, I tore my left knee, same ACL, and it really kind of just took me out because I was at my prime at that time of both in the kata and the fight, or the forms and the fighting. I had a great sponsor, Paul Mitchell Karate Team. I was a part of it for since I got on board with them in '92, maybe '91. And, as a, 18-year-old kid, being able to travel the country, and everything paid for, and getting these amazing opportunities. I had a chance to represent Asian World of Martial Arts. They still use some of my photos in their catalogs for the Taekwondo uniforms. And, it was definitely like a bummer, because everything happens for a reason, and for better or for worse, like at that time, I had my own karate school. I was not taking that too seriously because I was just like, oh, I'm traveling, I'm doing all these big things and da 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 da. But, the business requires to be ran like a business, right? Like in order for something to be successful, it has to be done professionally. And I was, but wasn't taking care of all the little details. And, it just, I would say, really until 2009, I just dabbled in martial arts, but I never really like life kind of jumped in front of me from the time that I tore my second knee. I ended up, closing down my karate school. I gave my 50 students at that time to another student of mine. He carried them on. I changed. I was kind of like looking for something new to do. I got away from like teaching full time. And it gave me a chance to kind of be around different environments, the corporate environment. I moved here to Texas because I'm born and raised in Southern California. And I moved here in 2005. I had some friends that had moved here to San Antonio, Texas. That's where I'm at now, the Alamo. And so when I moved here, I had taken over my son in 2001. I took him over, a full-time parent. His mom and I weren't together, but unfortunately she had passed of cancer that year, 2001. So I became from weekend dad to full-time dad. At that time, I guess I was just under 30, and ended up, long story short, a lot of things just kind of got in the way of me doing what I grew up doing, which was martial arts. But shortly, I moved here in 2005, and then I started having the opportunity to go back to training, and that's when I got involved with the Ohana Academy in 2009. My professor, Jason Yerington, he taught both the Muay Thai and the Jiu Jitsu. That's how I got going again, and where I'm at today is starting then 2009.
So just to kind of put things in a timeline, right? So you grew up and you were in the Oceanside area, Southern California, for most of your young to teen life, and you competed through the end of the 80s and the 90s. You moved to Texas in 2005. So where was it that you opened that first school Did you open that when you said that you were competing and you had a school at that time? So when did you open your first school, and where was that school?
It was in Oceanside.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Champions Karate Center, and I opened it in, I want to say 1990. I
Okay.
opened it in 90 or because I guess I was a little older. I think I was 20, so maybe like 91. I opened it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was flourishing. You know, I had the good fortune. You know, I know I looked at your questions and it's like, you know, who are some of your mentors?
Right.
And I had the good fortune of when I did join the Paul Mitchell karate team. I see these little pop-ups.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering who that is, by the way. If you guys are making comments, sometimes it shows up as Facebook user. If you could drop your name and let us know so we can give you a little shout out and
Thank you.
recognize you. So thank you guys for your comments. Go
So,
ahead, Gabe.
so when I joined the Paul Mitchell team, the coach was Don Rodriguez, and a lot of the stuff. Awesome, Jeff. Great to hear from you, brother. We keep up all the time on Facebook.
Yes, sir.
So when I started being around Don, in my opinion, one of the reasons why Paul Mitchell team was different than the other karate teams at that time, which had great talent too. You know, you had some of the bigger teams, Metro, and some of these other teams at that time, is because Don Rodriguez really knew how to run something professional. So I had that great opportunity to be around a pretty amazing coach. It's some of the coaching style that I still use today with the people that I train with, and how he synergized the competitors. You know, a lot of times, and you mentioned it earlier, forms guys are over here, fighters are over here.
Right.
And that's how the teams kind of act, right? We're going to go support we're fighters, we're going to go support our fighters. We're forms guys, we're going to go support our forms guys. But Don didn't allow that to happen. He was very much like, great to see you, Danny. Thank you for joining. He was very much about, no, it doesn't matter if you're a forms guy or a fighter, you all are the same team and you guys are all going to be ringside. So there was a camaraderie there that was a unique. I went off subject for a second just because I wanted to kind of give that shout out.
Okay. Yeah.
But then also Don introduced me to EFC, educational funding. And it was one of the first like billing companies that were out there. Right. You know, these are smart guys. They're like, okay, well, we're a billing company, but our clientele doesn't know how to run a business. Let's teach them how to run a business. Right. They can grow it, and then our billing company will be that much more successful. So, right. You know, I had the great fortune of being around. You know, Don introduced me to that group, and it's funny because I remember running into like one of the top guys at the time. His name was Steve LaValle. And he'd be like, "This is a circuit too, Gabe, but the difference is we make money here." I always remember that, right? You know, there was the martial arts circuit, and then you had this like business circuit of martial artists. Yes. But that really caused me to run my business. You know, in a way, I had a lot of amazing ideas that all these other schools, you know, because like the people that were involved with EFC were like Ernie Reyes. You know, him and his dad were part of EFC. You had Steve LaValle had many successful schools. You had Steve Oliver had a bunch of schools up in the Denver area. So top level people giving you these amazing ideas. My school was rocking and rolling. The bad part about it for me is I was kind of like split in two, right? I was like running the school and then traveling for these competitions. So, right. You know, when you're split focused and you don't have a plan in place of like, don't let the school dip when you're out of town. Right. It caught up to me, you know, and you know, I learned a lot that I still utilize today. You know, I'm back in the business. I started full-time working for Ohana Academy in 2014. And we have an amazing school. My professor, I work for my professor today. I mean, we have close to about 1,000 students. It's pretty amazing.
Wow, that's a huge school. That's a really big school. Well, you know, it's fun to kind of reminisce a little bit about, you know, the EFC days and that whole new phase. And you know, I remember looking at it like that too, because as I did the tournament circuit in the early to mid 90s. And I also opened my school in 1994, but I didn't really start getting serious until, gosh, almost 2004. And I ended up going to the Martial Arts Super Show, which was kind of a product in the end, really, of Century Martial Arts. But
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
EFC started all those different seminars and masterminds, and so you start going from a tournament circuit to the business seminar circuit and going to those and meeting just a ton of people. I'm so blessed to have Mike Metzger, Frank Silverman, Robbie Beard. These are all the guys that taught me about business, how to run my business and do what I do today. So it's just it's so interesting too that we go from a place of being a martial artist too, right? And our love for martial arts and our passion for martial arts. So we compete, we learn more about the martial arts, and then we get involved in the business and we start diving in more and more to the business so that we can help share more of the martial arts. And like you said, a martial arts school is only as strong as its systems and its team, right? And we learned we learned that the hard way. I mean, I remember starting my school trying to do everything myself, and that just does not work. So getting a team together and working towards a common goal. There was a gap though, right? So in between the first school, 1990, when did you actually decide to close that school down or let that school go? Because I think you had 50 students that you passed on to a student.
Yeah, it was probably 96.
Okay.
And it was a long time ago. So I say 50, but it could be a little more. But yeah, that was basically when I kind of, it was tough, right? When you experience failure, it's like boom, and failure with not being able to do what it is you were great at, right? I was a competitor, right? And I can't compete now because I got this blown knee, and I was a young kid. I didn't have insurance. Mm-hmm. So it really was like, it was 96. So I guess I was like 24, without knowing it, I was going through a depression. I was, I ended up like at playing Roadhouse at bars, and of course, being around that environment, better or for worse, it is what it is, and then I had the opportunity. My best friend brought me into this company, and I then at that point, that was like 98, I started to basically use my sales experience from martial arts and really excelled in this company. I was with this company for 8 years. Mm-hmm. You used to have them out there in California called the Penny Saver.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I worked for them for 8 years, and it was a good opportunity for me to kind of see like corporate America, mm-hmm. and really like take away at that time, what, maybe I use today or just seeing that culture, right. Understanding that environment, right? Because our students, it gave me an opportunity to kind of like understand, like, a lot of the students that come train with us, some are business owners, others are professional, attorneys or doctors or whatever it is. And then you have those people that are just part of corporate America, and the stuff that they go through every day, with, business meetings or having to hit these quotas, or, it's all the different things that happen in those kind of like Fortune 500 companies. Mm-hmm. It kind of gave me a little insight to how I operate my, I say my business is not my business, but our martial arts business today. Some mm-hmm. some of that time there with that company kind of just helped me in different ways.
Well, as a younger business owner and martial artist, right? If you taught a good class and you had good students and, you had fun doing it, for us that and we got paid for it, like that was great. That was amazing, right? But then you start to realize, and what you said with, corporate America and understanding how to work with professionals, is that there's a certain level of customer experience that is expected. Right. I mean, again, martial arts schools in the 80s and the 90s could survive because most karate school owners in those days, that was their part-time gig. That was like a side job. but
Yes.
it wasn't their full-time thing. So they had something that was their career, and then they had the martial arts school that they got to do kind of for a hobby. But if you want to do it as your full-time career, it has to be treated as such, like you said. And there are a lot of details when it comes to the martial arts business, how we deal with the parents, how we deal with the customers, how we deal with, retention, how we can, maximize our revenue within our schools so that we can be successful. Because, at the end of the day, the more successful our schools are, the more we have to offer our students. And the more we have to offer our students, maybe they have a potential career in martial arts as well. Maybe they have more opportunities than we were ever presented with. When you were a younger man, a teenager, what were your goals? What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you have a plan?
I've always been a big dreamer. So my it's funny because, my parents were very entrepreneurial. They basically, my mom bought this karate school from our sensei. He was kind of getting out of martial arts. Both her and I had our black belts. We got them in 1984. Got them kind of quick, but we were there every day. I think she bought it in 1987, and so that was my first job. That was basically what I saw myself doing is teaching martial arts. I loved it, and it was everything we did. We traveled to tournaments every weekend. My parents, it got expensive, right, to go to tournaments all throughout California, Nevada, Arizona. Right. So they started selling martial arts equipment. And so they were known as like we'd show up we'd pack up our stuff on Friday or Thursday night. We'd head out. We'd have a van full, one of those old school vans, and we'd unload everything and we'd set everything up, and we'd spend the weekend, at these tournaments. And we did that for a long time. So I always, I felt like, I was wrapped up so much in martial arts that would be my future. I laughed because actually I used to dream of being a club, like a nightclub owner, back in the day, I was like, 12, 13 years old, but, I kind of still do, cause I don't say nightclub owner, but I say like, I have, you said customer experience. And I thought of I provide a user experience. You come into our school at about 6 o'clock on a Monday through Thursday, I say, cause that's like our prime time. And you'll have, I remember going to Billy Blank's when he was in his heyday, and Taibo, his academy there. You'd have 200 people on his classroom floor, and then you'd have 200 people waiting for the next class, and that would just be like rinse and repeat. It was pretty amazing. Yep. And we're like that, like how do you manage 200 people in the building at the same time? And we're talking about, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 classes going. That's us. We have 4 different mats. We have a 10,000 square foot facility. So like on one mat, it's Muay Thai. One mat is Jiu-Jitsu, Jiu-Jitsu without the uniform. And then we have wrestling. So you're talking like all these different, like classes going, and that user experience, right? Like that's what like you're giving your students the what's the right word? You're giving them the experience, the positive experience that they're looking for. It can go the other way quickly, right? Like if you have a not a great a person, staff member that shows up that day, because they're having problems or whatever like that. Like that's fine. We all have lives, but we got to show up. We call it showtime at the Apollo. A lot of people don't remember the Apollo Theater.
I remember the Apollo.
Yeah. So like it's showtime, and that user experience is so important because, our mission statement is to build long-lasting relationships through jiu-jitsu and help people become the best versions of themselves. So we can't develop these long-term relationships unless we have an environment and systems in place so that they keep showing up. Because if they don't show up, then we can't impact their lives. That's out of everything that I've gone through, the ups and the downs, I really appreciate what I'm able to do every day, because, I show up at 2 p.m. I do my work from 2 to 4, contact new customers, take care of a couple of coaching issues. And then 4 o'clock at showtime at the Apollo. We have parents showing up at 4 o'clock, for the little 3 and 4-year-olds. Then at the same time, we have, 2 other little classes going on. And then it just doesn't stop until 8 o'clock at night. We have back-to-back classes. So that's my life. But I do feel like the experiences that I've had growing up in it, being away from it for a little bit, and experiencing corporate America, and then getting back into it, has really helped me to shape, like, being able to do this. There's not a lot of schools out there with what we do.
Well, I love it. I love that. I love your mission statement, talking about building lasting, long relationships, because, with a lot of, especially kids, but adults too, we live in a society where we kind of just check the box and move from one activity to the next. And, we like this for a little while, then we move on. But, martial arts, we know this in our heart and at the core. Martial arts is a lifestyle. It doesn't matter if it's jiu-jitsu, tong sudo, ishinru, right? Martial arts is martial arts, and it is a lifestyle. And so by your vision statement saying creating long-lasting relationships, because that's really what it's all about. I mean, how many of us that have schools, the students that we have the best relationship with, stay the longest, and they stay the longest because of that relationship. That kind of takes over sometimes what they're learning. What they're learning is just almost a byproduct sometimes of the relationship.
They become better people. They become, happier people. They become, better husbands, better wives through martial arts. And we're not like the end all be all, right? But, when without martial arts, and when I was away from it for a while, I can't think of not doing it now,
right? Because
of the benefits that I experience, the way I feel after a training session. Mm-hmm. It helps, especially in today's day and age. I mean, it because you're your own students, but with all of the social media, with all of the devices, you remember 20 years ago, it wasn't about getting my child off the device. It was about the bullying, or maybe we want to get them with having more confidence, mm-hmm. which is still probably like a lot of the people that come to us are looking for the benefits of the martial arts. Right. But I get a lot of parents that just say, man, I need to get my child off of these devices. Yeah. And it just happens slowly but surely, right? Like you just do it because it kind of distracts them a little bit. And then before you know it, they're like so in it. And the same thing for the adults, right? Like they're so caught up in their worlds, and this world is just moving so fast. Yes. That outside of religion, or if you're practicing, you're going to church or whatever like that, like martial arts is just really a way for us to come together like a community, to share something that's positive and really change lives. I agree. And you said we may not be the end all be all, but I can absolutely with 100% certainty say that if everyone trained in martial arts at some point in their life, at least for a little while, it would impact their life, not just for that moment, but literally for the rest of their life. Now, listen, I know that you're pressed for time, and we're right there almost at that 45-minute mark, which I know you got to get to teaching in just a minute, but I want to ask if anybody has a quick question. We've had quite a few comments, so thank you to Danny Williams and Jeff Doss, Cecil Peoples, Roseanne Ozatot. Thank you guys all for being on today and commenting. If you have any questions, please let us know. Jeff Doss will be on the show coming up later this year, so I'm looking forward to interviewing him as well. But Mr. Reynaga, it's been a pleasure just talking with you and letting you share your history and your stories with us today. You've put out a lot of great messages so far. If there's one thing that you could leave the audience with today, what would that be? Get involved with something, whether it be, and again, I was looking at your questions, and it's like, what's one thing that you struggled with as a child, and I was like, what, I had different things, right? But follow through. Yeah. Like, we all have intentions of doing great things, but, life beats us up, and then we lose our focus. And like, for me, of course, jujitsu is like my daily life. I do jujitsu every day, 5 days a week. I take the weekends off most of the time unless I'm competing, and that seems to be enough. But it's not, because I'm not doing something that's giving back to my community. So that's one thing that I'm working on, and also I encourage other people to do that, because we all work, we all have families, we all have extracurricular activities. But in my opinion, this is just my opinion, if we're not working to better our community, then we're just kind of like in our little insulary bubbles. And in my opinion, that's not enough. Like there's too much going on today to where, if I can, my plan, I'm just telling you, my personal plan is, we go to a great church. It's called Community Bible Church. And they have all these different, like they're a huge mega church, and they have all these different like little programs. Like one of them, as an example, my wife's grandmother, she they actually have a group of people that are designated to go out and visit these elderly people, and it's so small of a thing, but again, the impact you're doing in your community is huge. So like, some people aren't about church, you have other community organizations out there, like that just kind of like giving back. I think that's probably like, because it's just the world we live in today. We gotta be here for our people.
I agree. I love that you brought that up, and I'm happy to hear you say that. And it sounds like you're doing some really great things and giving back to your community. So guys, that's it for today. Go out there and find a way to give back to your community. Find a way to get involved. It doesn't have to be super big. It could be something that maybe you do once a week or once a month, but find something that you can get involved and help your community grow. Because I know for us, our community is what has helped our schools grow and has helped keep us afloat. Why would we not go back and support our community? So get out there, go out there and make a difference. Thank you, Mr. Reynaga. I look forward to catching up with you another time soon. And guys, we'll be back on for Master Motivation on Friday. We got a special guest. We got Pat Militich coming up this Friday, and many more guests in the 2023 year. So thank you so much, sir. And go out and make a difference, guys.